Hello, you wonderful people. So for today's video, I'm going to talk about the boys. More specifically, I want to talk about superpowers when it comes to the boys, just kind of a larger conversation about them and how they operate in this universe and stuff. I'm going to specifically talk about the TV show because I've never read the comic, so I don't know how this conversation necessarily reflects in the TV show versus how it does in the comic. For this video, I want to talk about superpowers in the capacity of, like, there's some kind of unspoken, unreal known rules about how stuff works in this universe that is just, I think, nothing's ever really specified, but it's just pure speculation on, like, a great example to kind of be a starting off point is that when it comes to this universe, when it comes to superpowers, every superhero has some level of enhanced strength or durability. There's like a base level boost, and that varies from hero to hero. Some heroes are stronger and more durable than others, so that's where you can have some situations where, like, even a regular human can just kill a soup naturally, whereas other cases it's like, no, only a soup will be able to kill a soup. It kind of, like I said, it just varies because every soup has their very specific ability. That's just like, you know, a great example. Like, so for example, like Starlight, let's use her for example. Her main power is her light abilities, but she does have a level of increased strength and endurance. So her endurance and strength is going to be stronger than someone like Mesmer, for example, who was easily brutally murdered by Butcher. Because like Mesmer's power is like, oh, like I can read your mind or your memories by touching you, but it's not like he's super strong. Like I said, everyone has like their main ability, and then like everything else can kind of that stat screen when it comes to your strength and endurance and speed and yada yada, so on and so forth. Those numbers vary from hero to hero. That's why you have someone like Homelander, who is, his main power is his heat vision, his flight, his superhuman strength, his invulnerability. He's kind of like the cheat sheet type of situation, the cheat code of like, yeah, he's got all these like heightened boosts in comparison to other superheroes. His main abilities like cover the board, whereas others aren't exactly like that type of situation. So I think that's just kind of an interesting thing that's never really fully discussed over the course of the show, but that's been a conversation people who are fans of the show have kind of discussed. It's like an it's a speculative thing for the most part, but the show kind of hints it out without ever really fully talking about it or discussing it. Once again, I don't know the comic book, so I don't know if they've ever really gone into specifics in the comics about this, or does it work completely differently in the comics than it does in the TV show. Because the TV show, despite like how big it is, there's still a groundedness to, at least I think there's a groundedness to the TV show, because it's a TV show, so you're limited with what you could do in some capacity, so it's probably not as heightened as the comic book is in comparison. Once again, staying in the vein of superpowers, what I think is an interesting conversation is something I think I've talked about in reviews. Is something that I think is so fascinating, that whatever superpower the compound V would unlock in you never changes. It's always going to be a constant because it's written in your DNA. A great example I'll use is, let's take Kimiko for example. When she lost her powers because of Soldier Boy, when she got injected with Compound V again, she got the exact same ability she had previously because it's already encoded in her DNA what ability she'll get. So no matter what the case may be, she would always get the same powers back no matter what. A great example to kind of go alongside that is you take something like the 10th V situation, because at no point throughout the multiple times that Butcher and Huey took the 10th V did their abilities ever change. They always stay the same. But then there's kind of a larger conversation of, even though 10th V is a modified version of Compound V, did Butcher and Huey always get the same abilities because it was the 10th V? If they took permanent Compound V, the original recipe, would they still get the same abilities? Or is, because 10th V is a little different, did that shift like something in their DNA? Like if Huey took Compound V, would he get back his teleportation ability? I would assume yes, but for the most part I'm thinking yes, but I think it's just interesting to think that there's kind of a small window or percentage that no, maybe he wouldn't, just because 10th V is slightly modified than the original recipe, so that might have caused some differences in the way the DNA represents that superhuman gene or whatever. But what's also an interesting development too is how there's a lot of overlap between superpowers. And this has been an interesting conversation I've heard people talk about in the past. Like, there is like a limited number of superpowers. It's not like it's this massive wide range, because there's a lot of overlap with powers. But it becomes this conversation of how, for one, they can vary from person to person, which I think also kind of plays into the it's written in your code and your DNA type of situation of, like, a great example would be like you have someone like Termite versus Emma and how different their abilities are. Their abilities are the same, but it manifests itself differently, because from what we saw from Termite, he never actually ever had to puke, and that was kind of an early conversation about when we found out Emma's circumstances and how she had to handle her ability, you know, that Emma had to go to such lengths as purging herself to shrink, and she has to indulge herself to grow bigger. You know, so, but we never saw that with Termite. He had easier control over it. He's a more like Ant-Man comparison. As we kind of see, Emma's powers are tied to like a psychological situation and her upbringing and everything. So I think that plays a role in why her powers manifest the way they do. But what we got at the end of the season 1 finale of Gen V implies that, right, she doesn't need to purge, you know, or does her like emotionally purging cover that gap? You know, because obviously their powers are tied to their emotions, so now she doesn't have that association with it anymore, so she has a little bit better control, or at least can learn better control like a Termite. But then we also get the conversation about Victoria versus Marie. They have the same abilities. They are bloodbenders, but Victoria's ability initially manifests from what we see. Our introduction to it is her eyes glow cloudy. We just associate her as, oh, a head popper. It's not until Gen V when Marie and her meet and when she reveals, oh no, she's a bloodbender too. She's just always manifested in her blowing up people's body parts, which we see in the season finale Marie is able to do when she blows up Kate's arm. So, but it's like, now it becomes this conversation of, when it's all said and done, will Marie's abilities eventually like upgrade to the point that her powers manifest the same way that Victoria's does? Like, will she eventually get to the point her eyes glaze over, or is that something specifically associated with Victoria's? Because we know they're bloodbenders, but they're at varying degrees. Like, obviously, once again, Victoria's doing the head popping and blowing up other bits of the body. Well, can just blow up the entire body if she wants to. But we've never seen her use her abilities to the extent Marie has, using her like blood like a whip, or even like in the season finale shooting it like daggers. So it's like, does that show that the ability has manifested itself differently and Marie's able to use it differently? You know, because Victoria probably only uses her power the way she does is because she's always used it like that. Like, it's probably that superpower, like superhero thing of like, this power manifests itself how you feel more comfortable and it's more controllable for you. Because of the trauma of how she killed her parents, Marie's always manifested the ability like that, whereas Newman manifested it in the way that she's always, from what we know about Victoria, or rather Nadia's past, we saw that she killed her parents by blowing up their heads. That it's like that's her association with that power, and it always manifests itself in that same capacity. So like I said, it's unclear who's where on the diagram of mastery of the ability. So like, is Marie further along than Victoria, because Marie's manifested her powers in different ways that Victoria hasn't? But we've seen she can't just straight up just regularly control the blood. She just chooses never to do that, because Marie's powers was a byproduct of her using her own blood, because she never knew how powerful she really is. And it also kind of went into the fact is that Marie cut herself, like just like Emma has like her psychological triggers manifesting that correlate with her abilities, so does Marie, because their powers are triggered and brought about with trauma. But Victoria's kind of taken that trauma and used it as a weapon. I mean, who knows if it's like fully trauma, why she keeps head popping the way she does. Like I said, it leaves like a psychological imprint, and I think your powers like end up latching onto that maybe that psychological trauma, and forever it's imprinted in your mind of this is how it should manifest, and it's stuck that way. And maybe you can change it, but maybe Victoria's just never chosen to go down different avenues of using her powers like Marie has, or maybe she has and she just found, now this works best for me type of situation. So like I said, that's where it's like the varying degrees of mastery on both of their parts is going to be interesting to see get explored more as you know, the boys goes for it, as well as Gen V. Because we also get into that lengthier conversation too about, and circling back to the whole it's encoded in your DNA conversation as what powers you end up get. A great example of that would be Ryan and Homelander. From what we see, for the most part, it seems like Ryan has all the same powers as Homelander. So it is communable in that way of, once again, whatever's written in a parent's DNA passed on to their child. Yeah, like using the Andre and polarity of it all, it's like, it doesn't seem like Andre's a natural born suit. It seems like he's got the same case as everyone else where, hey, I was just born a regular human and then my parents injected me with compound V when I was a baby. So, but once again, it's written in his DNA because, hey, my dad had these abilities and now it's passed on to me. Like, even, like, it makes you almost wonder, like, did the compound V change polarity's DNA so that when he had a child, his child has that Magneto ability already written in his DNA, or did it already exist inside of polarity before he became polarity? And regardless, because that's what I'm assuming that would be the case, like using Marie for example, if her parents were to have taken compound V, because they, for all intents and purposes, seem to be just regular humans, not unless there's some reveal there, but it seems like I don't see them retconning that to make them soups. I think they're just regular people. They didn't have compound V, yet Marie's ability is bloodbending. I think if you were to give her mom, or I mean, maybe it also varies from person to person because we don't know how it works in a parental sense. Like, who did she get the bloodbending DNA soup gene from? Was it her mom? Is that something in her mom's DNA? Is that something in her dad's DNA? Is it their DNA coming together to make that happen? Unclear. So, but either way, let's say like her mom took it, like her mom would most likely manifest the same abilities, which leads to a larger conversation too, because this could be something they tackle in the future of Gen V, being that because Marie has that and it's encoded in her DNA, if Annabeth, whatever her circumstances may be, ever got compound V in her system, which obviously, like, it depends on if she ever got it later on, probably would never, because obviously there's ramifications for getting compound V later in life versus getting it as a child, as we know with those St. Groves, St. Groves is a hospital place. Like, with that whole facility, we saw the ramifications of giving someone older compound V and how that worked out. So, but my point being, Annabeth would most likely develop bloodbending abilities as well, unless we're going back to the conversation of, let's say the bloodbending comes from Marie's mom's side of things, but then, like, what about their dad's DNA? Like, maybe that will shift things and maybe he's more likely to have a different ability, and if Annabeth got the compound V, maybe she'd manifest the abilities her dad did. You know, I'm not a geneticist, so I don't fully know the translation of, like, two separate DNAs coming together, especially when you're talking about two girls and the X chromosome and the Y chromosome and how much of a play, like, obviously they're both double X chromosomes, but then like what the Y chromosome would do when we're having a larger conversation about a superhero gene of some sort, you know. So I'm not smart enough to have that level of the conversation, but it's just interesting thought process. This also leads to the conversation about Victoria's daughter, about, because I don't remember if they've ever said, because I think there were implications that her daughter is adopted. I think she adopted her daughter. I don't remember. I don't remember if they had those conversations or not in the show, because there was a girl that popped up in the teaser trailer. There's a girl that popped up in the trailer that I'm like, is that Newman's daughter? We know she got compound V in season 3 of The Boys, but we don't know what her power was. Now, if she was Victoria's blood-related daughter, then she'll most likely be a bloodbender, but if she's adopted, she could be having a completely different ability. Like I said, there's a girl in the trailer I thought was Zoe. Once again, this was a teaser I'm specifically talking about, but if it's not Zoe, it might be some other girl, so that conversation will be... I'm wrong, but the larger conversation being had there is still relevant. I quickly want to interject and say, like, obviously I'm recording this on a different day because this is actually something I wanted to bring up during the video, but I completely forgot to talk about. But that point being that something I think also influences powers, and specifically what powers you get, tends to be kind of personality trait related. Like, a great example I'll use is like Huey. Oh, Huey's a little bit scared, kind of a little fearful. He's kind of lived a lot of his life that way. Obviously we see his dad's kind of the same way, because what did his dad tell him in the first season? You don't have that fight in you, never did. I know because I don't have it in me either. So what power does Huey get when he takes to Temp V? He has the power to teleport, and he gets a weird power where it's like his clothes don't teleport with him. So it fits kind of with his personality and just kind of the scaredy cat in him a little bit. Another example would be like translucent as well as his son Maverick. They both have the ability to turn invisible, but as we see, they're perverts who like to hide out in the bathrooms. That becomes that chicken or the egg situation of, oh, is your power influenced by your personality, or is your personality influenced by your power? It's a conversation I've had before as well. Like, the reason why I actually came to this thought process, and it's something I will always link back to the TV show Misfits. If you've ever seen it, it's a British kind of superhero show, but basically it's like the regular people getting superpowers after a storm. Basically, a lot of those superpowers were reflective of the personalities. Once you get to know the characters, you're like, oh, it's so befitting that they have this particular power and stuff like that. So I've always thought that was an interesting premise. And once again, the show's never really dived into that, but you can see correlation between powers and abilities. Like, for example, Butcher getting the powers he did because, well, he's always been a rage-filled person. I mean, even aside from the Homelander stuff, even Becca was like, yeah, that was always kind of daring you. To be fair, we understand considering the upbringing he went through. But also you can make the argument, not just rage stuff aside, that just being who Butcher is, the brutality, the super strength, like kind of wanting to destroy and obliterate everything, so him having laser vision fit, but also his perception of strength. The strongest hero is Homelander, and he wants the power to kill Homelander, so it makes sense that he'd have powers very similar to Homelander. To be fair, that's also like the show, and I don't know if the comic does this as well, but the show has always struck that point, very poetic point of how similar Homelander and Butcher are, that they are two sides of the same coin. We even heard the story from A-Train, I think it was in season 1, where he talked about the fact is it was like I think it was like a drive-by shooting or something like that, and he ended up outrunning the bullet. So it is that thing of probably like the neighborhood he grew up in, you always have to be on the move, you have to be on the run. I think you could make the argument with Maeve's power, it's just, hey, I want to be strong, I want someone to never be able to hurt me. I mean, because we have no idea how long, like, you know, maybe Maeve's kind of hidden herself, her bisexuality. Who knows if she's always been open with her bisexuality, or whether she just hid that because of Homelander, stuff like that. I'm sure superhero-wise that doesn't really, I don't know, because she hid it even from Vought, because Vought didn't really know about it until they found out, and then they started playing into it. To be fair, that's because Homelander put her on blast. But even going to Annie and her life, she's a ray of hope and light, so it fits her like very hopeful personality. I think you could even make the argument with Kimiko, like she was raised in, like, you know, a child soldier environment, and she wanted to be strong and probably indestructible and wanted to do whatever it takes so that no one could ever take her freedom for her again, to have the strength to protect her brother, to look for her brother. So her powers of being super strong, but also like that crazy healing factor of hers. So like I said, it just, there's certain aspects that are the character's core aspects of who they are and their personalities that really define their abilities in a lot of ways. Like I said, I think that's kind of like I said, an unspoken thing also in the show. I think you could, if you really line it up, you can draw so many parallels between characters, personality, and their powers. But like I said, it's a chicken or an egg situation of how much is, you know, one way of the powers influencing the personalities, or the personality influencing power. I mean, it kind of seems like a lot of times it's a 50-50 bounce back and forth. Like it might even vary from character to character. So I wanted to include this section somewhere in the video, because I just thought it was kind of an important conversation to kind of have in the grand context of everything in relation to powers and getting them. I think this is kind of a key discussion that can be had as well. This is just me talking about the TV show because I don't know the comic book enough to compare and contrast. I'd actually love to know, like, if you are more familiar with the comics, do they ever go as in depth as I'm trying to go about it? Or do they keep it kind of just as vague as a TV show? Or do they keep it even vaguer than a TV show? Or do they answer it and make it a little more clearer in the comic than they do the TV show? I'd love to know your thoughts in general about the entire conversation as a whole, your thoughts about everything. Do you agree with some of my points? Do you disagree? And what are maybe you're somewhere in the middle. You know, let me know your thoughts on everything. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.